$1. A coin-sized request in a city built on skyscraper-sized egos. Tiny enough to whisper, bold enough to test whether anyone still looks up. That was all James Walker wanted on a morning, so cold it scrubbed the color from the air. It didn't begin like a fable about wealth meeting want. It began with the wind working its way through a threadbare coat, and a former staff sergeant tried to remember when January didn't feel like a verdict. The sun had cleared the rooftops, but never found any warmth to bring with it. The kind of New York morning where steam rose from grates like the city was trying to exhale and never quite could. James pulled his jacket close. It didn't help. Cold like that found the seams and lived there. He could tell the temperature by his fingers. If he could still wiggle them, it wasn't the worst day. If they felt like wood, it meant pain later. Today was somewhere in between, which counted as a win when the calendar stopped offering easy ones. He had a ritual, because rituals are scaffolding when buildings fall. He checked his pockets. One folded napkin, a bus transfer stub he kept for reasons he couldn't explain, 27 cents. He counted the way some people count beads, quiet and steady, as if repetition alone could lean reality a little. He straightened the corner of his cardboard mat. He adjusted the angle of his backpack so the zipper wouldn't chew the strap. Small acts of order in a world that had tilted months ago and never corrected. Before, there had been a shift to prepare for. Uniform pressed by habit more than pride. Boots laced tight. A quiet kiss from Sarah with coffee that smelled like morning should smell. He'd say, "See you, kiddo." And Michael would turn from his homework with that small wave that seemed to contain the whole future. After came differently. Dizziness. A monitor beep. Bills stacking like barricades. Words like risk profile and liability politely taking place of "we're letting you go." He told himself he'd never ask. He promised her. He stood by that promise until the cold taught him that some vows get rewritten by survival. He'd chosen a spot the way he once chose vantage points. Angle, traffic, line of sight to places people look when they're lost. Near the subway, but not so near that a badge would make a problem out of existence. Close enough to coffee, to remember what warmth smelled like. Far enough from storefronts to avoid being moved along by someone whose day depended on an empty sidewalk. He kept it clean, because order was a habit his hands still remembered even when luck forgot him. A chip bag skittered along the pavement, kicked forward by a gust, then lifted lightly, as if the wind had fingers and a sense of humor. He watched it bounce, saw a memory superimpose itself like old film. Michael, 14, chasing a napkin through a park, laughing at the way paper moves like his ideas it refuses to share. "Come back here, butterfly." Sarah's laugh chimed in, that warm, bell-like sound memories polish until it glows. The ache in his chest pressed harder. Not the heart kind, the other kind, the one that makes you swallow like you forgot how. Commuters poured past, each inside a small world built of to-do lists and notifications. A woman in heels clipped by him, and didn't see him even when she said sorry to the air. A man muttered about a meeting. A kid in a hoodie bobbed his head to music. He didn't share with the street. James kept his posture neutral. Not inviting, not challenging, just there. That's how you survive in places where everyone has somewhere else to be. He had not eaten since the last bowl of soup from the church kitchen 2 afternoons ago. He had saved a roll in his bag. It fell apart when he touched it this morning, going crumbs in his palm like it was pretending to be bread. Hunger comes in degrees. The sharp kind gnaws. The dull kind hums. Today it hummed, a low, steady thrum beneath the cold. And then the choreography unfolded. The kind you learn to see when you work security long enough to notice patterns before other people notice shapes. A formation moved down the block, not rushed, not slow, each person taking a slice of angle, eyes sweeping over doorways, rooftops, windows with the practiced rhythm of people who train to think in concentric circles. A VIP wasn't a guess. It was in the spacing. He could have drawn it from memory. Point man, flanks, rear guard, the spacing professionals who know what unknowns can do when they get the chance. Inside the moving geometry was a teenager most people recognize without ever having met him. Not ordinary tall, noticeably tall. Composed in a way that takes either practice or a childhood spent being looked at all the time. The face was familiar, not because James had studied it, but because news cycles carved certain profiles into public walls. He didn't feel awe or anger. He felt, strangely, a pinch of recognition that sat not in the mind but in the place you store fatherhood. He thought, Michael would have stood that way if time had let him. That thought landed softly instead of breaking him open. That surprised him. He heard Sarah again, one of those phrases that never wore out. Keep your dignity. He had kept it through the limp of unemployment papers, through eviction papers that always arrived with the same hard edges, through nights spent counting ceiling cracks. That belonged to places he didn't. Pride had kept him from asking the world for anything more than space to remain quietly in it. The formation approached. A guard on the left did what you do when someone moves near the principal. Shifted half an angle, eyes narrowing not to harden but to focus, to sort threat from tired man in a thin coat. James could have named the model of radio on the guard's belt. He could have recited a dozen protocols that would be activated if he took a step too fast. He had taught some of them. He stood anyway. Knees that had chased perimeters for 20 years objected out loud. The world tilted by a degree, then settled. He touched the wall with fingertips that still remembered the shape of a baton grip. His mouth didn't want to cooperate. It had not asked anyone for anything in a long time. He watched the boy's face. Not bored, not performative. Present, not looking past him. That mattered. He said the smallest ask he knew how to say. Could you spare $1? He added please because Sarah had trained courtesy into him like muscle memory. It came out rough, like words scrape along the surface on their way out. The detail moved like a body. A shoulder blocked his view for 1/2 second too long, and he felt that familiar surge of adrenaline that says you're about to be ignored for your own safety. Then the boy spoke, not loud, not soft. It's okay. And the wall in front of James did not turn into a door exactly, but it shifted enough for the air to change. You're a veteran, not a question. A statement that landed with the weight of being seen. Yes, sir. Staff Sergeant James Walker. MP's Desert Storm. He didn't mean to stand straighter. The words do that to a spine whether you allow it or not. They carry a rank you don't check at the curb. Phones angled in, lenses catching frames they would label without context. A phrase formed in his mind, and he hated it even as it came. Homeless vet begs rich kid. People would fight in comment sections about what it meant, about who owed what to whom. None of them would feel the cold he felt in that moment. None of them would see the way the boy's eyes flicked to the VA label on the medication bottle peeking from the backpack pocket, or the way his gaze swept James's corner and marked its tidiness, or the way he registered the folded napkin like it meant something. "You've been here all week," the boy said, with a matter-of-fact tone that wasn't there to impress anyone. "You read the paper on the bench. You help that lady gather her groceries when the bag tore. You keep the sidewalk clean. You don't ask unless someone asks first." James swallowed something that wasn't food. Relief, maybe? Relief is a strange comfort. It lets you breathe in a little, like your ribs just remember the purpose of air. "Why today?" the boy asked, not unkindly. If you never ask, why ask me? There are questions that feel like a hand extended without deciding whether to shake or lift. He answered with the truth that had been circling all morning. "You reminded me of my son. He was about your age when he stopped. Some edges don't need to be named to cut." The boy paused in a way that signaled he had heard what wasn't said. Then the calls began. He turned slightly, a half-turn that kept James in sight, while his voice took on a tone that belonged in rooms where decisions stack atop each other. He asked to be connected. He used please like a tool instead of a reflex, and people on the other end of the signal moved because influence has a speed faster than traffic. Wind tore around the corner and made a gulping sound in the throat of the street. The boy's coat came off in one motion, the way people remove a barrier, without asking whether it's symbolic. He held it out, not a flourish, not a gesture designed for cameras. Practical. James tried the old dance. No, son, I couldn't. Because refusing is a shield. The boy waited him out with the patience of someone who has learned that a second of silence can do more than another sentence. The coat fit wrong in the right way. Longer than he was used to, heavier than he remembered coats being. It felt like being allowed inside from the weather, which is different than simply getting warm. When you have the power to help someone, you should, the boy said. Not a quote, he was auditioning for someone else's approval. A line worn smooth by use. Like a coin you keep in your pocket to remind yourself what matters. He made notes on a tablet, as if he were sketching a plan between steps. A guard murmured about their schedule. He shook his head once. This is important. An SUV turned a corner and tucked itself against the curb like it had been waiting for this block all morning. More guards. Not a crowd this time. Reinforcements to handle everything except the human part unfolding at the center. James felt a brief flash of paranoia. What if this was a gentle relocation in disguise? The boy anticipated the fear and answered it without being asked. Would you wait in the car? It's warm. You have my word this isn't a trick to move you along. The choice was laid out with respect. James nodded. The last time anyone asked him to choose had been a while ago. The interior heat hit him like a story about another planet. Seats that folded around you. Once you let yourself sit, without bracing, a bottle of water offered with Sergeant. His hands shook lest once the coat's heat met the car's heat, and they made an agreement with his bones. Through the tinted glass, he watched the boy do 3 things at once without making a show of doing 3 things at once. Listen, decide, connect. He hold music the way you handle a minor inconvenience when the major thing matters more. Thank you for waiting, the boy said when he slipped into the seat. I have a few arrangements. If you're willing, that opening mattered. It asked permission. It didn't drop charity on someone's chest like a weight and call a blanket. First, a room, not a bunk. 30 days. 3 blocks away. A door that locks from the inside, and a place to put your wallet when you shower. An address, so forms treat you like a person with a mailbox. Second, an interview, not a favor. Trump Tower. Security consultant. Train new hires. Review protocols. Mostly desk work. Your heart isn't a disqualifier. 2 o'clock today. Third, the VA. Tomorrow morning. A full checkup. Covered. Paperwork pushed forward by people whose job is to understand systems that chew time unless someone greases gears on purpose. It felt larger than he could hold, and yet it didn't feel excessive. It felt fitted. Not a miracle. A plan. He moved to object. Because refusing can feel like retaining control. The boy didn't argue. He explained why he'd chosen this shape. Because you asked for $1, not a performance. Because you did the work of dignity when no one was clapping. Because I've been watching you all week, and you have habits that make places better, which is exactly what good security work is. Paying attention and improving the space you're in, a card slid across. A number that was an assurance in plastic form. If anything jams, call. Someone will unjam it. Not an invitation to dependency. A guarantee that momentum wouldn't be allowed to collapse because a clerk misfiled a letter. Later, in a room that smelled faintly of citrus and laundry machines that worked on the first try, James folded a towel and set it down just so. He stood under a shower until the fog on the mirror reminded him that warmth can be visible. His knuckles lost their gray. The skin of his hands looked like it belonged to someone who didn't sleep near vents to steal heat. He ate, not fast, not slow. He gave each bite the attention you give things you don't want to take for granted. He stared at the soup bag on the chair, like it might vanish if he blinked too confidently. He unzipped it. Not new, not flashy. Right. He laid out the photograph of Sarah and Michael on the nightstand. He did not apologize to her out loud, because he no longer felt like he had to. Keep your dignity had always meant don't forget who you are, not don't accept help even when help is the honest next step. He finally let himself understand that difference the way you finally understand a map once you walk the streets it shows. 2 o'clock arrived in a lobby that told you about itself of marble, but the details that mattered were smaller. The guard who greeted him said, "Afternoon, Sergeant," and his shoulders answered with alignment. The manager, who shook his hand, didn't oversqueeze to demonstrate authority. The questions in the interview were specific, respectful, real. How do you handle a training group where two people think they already know everything? How do you write a protocol for a lobby that has to feel welcoming while staying secure? How do you instruct new guards to read silence? The trick is teaching them that quiet isn't nothing. James said, quiet is a data stream if you listen right. He didn't oversell. He didn't understate. He didn't hide the medical. He laid it out plain. I won't run stairs at speed. I will outplan the stairs, so you don't need someone to run them. Heads nodded. Notes were taken. He shook hands again, and they were the kind of handshakes that mean we'll call you today, not we'll let this fade. When he stepped back outside, the air felt less sharp. Maybe the day had warmed. Maybe the shape of his future had trapped a little heat and kept it. He walked. Not to the sidewalk he'd memorized, but to the corner where a coffee cart steamed up a slice of morning. He bought a small cup and held it like a promise. He looked up at the buildings, and for the first time in months, he didn't feel like they were leaning over him. He thought about the boy, not the last name, not the headlines, the actual person, pacing a circle on a sidewalk and insisting that the day bend a little to make room for someone else's next step. He thought of Michael, and for once the memory arrived with light around it, like a photograph taken in a window instead of under a fluorescent bulb. He imagined telling his son about the morning, how a small ask unlocked a larger possibility. He imagined Michael grinning, that particular grin that said, see, it works when people choose to be decent. That evening, he called the number on the card, not to ask for more, just to say, the interview went well, thank you. The assistant answered with a tone that said gratitude is not a burden. We're glad to hear it, Mr. Walker. Let us know if you need anything else. He didn't hang on the line. He didn't ask to be put through to the boy. Not every thank you needs to be delivered right away. Some thank yous ripen. The VA appointment the next morning came with a waiting room where the chairs remembered being sat on by people like him. The nurse had a voice that treated each patient like a person with a name rather than a case with a code. Tests stacked, blood drawn, numbers recorded. The cardiologist spoke in specifics. Here's what we'll monitor. Here are the meds that make sense. Here's what we can accelerate. He listened without trying to sound braver than he felt. He walked out with a plan printed on paper. He folded carefully and slid into the inside pocket of the coat that still felt like a borrowed season. Days can pivot on hours, but the living of them still happens minute by minute. He practiced answers to questions that might come in training sessions. He wrote bullet points he hadn't been asked to write yet. Lesson outlines on de-escalation that use patience instead of volume. He reviewed the lobby twice, not to make trouble, just to prepare his mind to think like it used to, unbroken lines of sight, techniques to move congestion without making anyone feel moved. The call came the next afternoon while he sat on the bed, reading a newspaper for the pleasure of the rustling sound it makes when you turn a page slowly. We like to extend an offer. The number was not the number you brag about to strangers. It was fair. More important, it was real. Benefits, yes. A schedule that wouldn't bully his heart. A seat at a table where he could be useful again. He said, thank you, and the words didn't wobble. After he hung up, he sat quiet for a long minute. If you've ever been to war, even in a support role, you learn the difference between quiet that feels like danger and quiet that feels like safety. This was the second kind. He let himself feel it. He walked back to the block where it began. The cardboard was gone, not because anyone had claimed it, but because you don't leave altars to your hardest days when you're allowed to move forward. He stood for a moment in the place where he'd said the smallest sentence with the biggest consequences. He did not make a speech to the air. He did not stage a moment for anyone's approval. He smiled once, small, private, and then turned toward the direction of his next day. People online argued about it, because that is what people do with other people's moments. Some said it was staged. Some said it was luck. Some said it was a lesson that should not have needed a famous last name to land. The city ate the discourse like popcorn and made more. James didn't read much of it. He knew where the truth lived, in the heat of a coat taken off as easily as a barrier, in a voice saying, wait in the car so you can think without freezing, in a phone call that nudged 3 pieces at once, because someone decided bureaucracy should work for people today, not someday. He paid it forward before the phrase ever crossed his mind, not with shiny gestures, with attention. On his second week in the new role, he spotted a trainee whose bravado was covering a kind of fear that gets people loud in the wrong ways. He took him aside, taught him the trick of reading the room by reading himself first. If your heart is sprinting, your eyes lie. Slow your pulse so your eyes can catch up. The kid nodded, still tried again. The lobby seemed to breathe easier. Sometimes the most effective security move is a calmer person. He kept a mental ledger, quiet miracles. The overnight cleaner whose eyes went shiny when he learned the new schedule would let him see his daughter after school twice a week. The receptionist who used to over-apologize for other people's impatience and learned how to redirect without absorbing. The elderly couple who came in lost and left oriented because someone met them at the elevator instead of pointing and hoping. These weren't stories the internet would trade back and forth. They were the kind that build a life. He carried Sarah and Michael with him, not like weights, but like threads woven into the new cloth. He found a small frame for the nightstand in the room that wouldn't be his forever, but was his for now. He set their faces where dawn could find them. He spoke to them sometimes, not for comfort, but for company. I'm trying the ways you would recognize. He would say, I'm saying yes when yes is called for. I'm saying please when please is brave. I'm saying thank you so the world remembers I know what was given and what I earned. He saw the boy twice more, both times in passing. Once in a hallway where the day had obviously been long, and once outside where late afternoon made the buildings look less like edges and more like shapes. The second time, the boy didn't wave him over. He didn't need to. A nod was enough. There are acknowledgments that say, we both remember. That's plenty. One Sunday, James walked a few extra blocks to a park he hadn't visited in years. Families everywhere. Soccer balls rolling. Strollers negotiating pebbles. Laughter snipping the air into pieces that felt throwable. A napkin lifted from a picnic table and took off across the grass. A small boy chased it. Because small boys are agents of joy when you let them be. The napkin danced, then surrendered. The boy held it up like a prize. James laughed out loud, a sound that vibrated his ribs in a pattern he'd missed. He sat on a bench that needed paint and watched the afternoon take its time. He let himself imagine a version of Michael at this age, taller now, with a voice that would have carried the shape of both of their histories. He let the imagining be sweet and nothing else. Later, he passed a busker with a guitar whose case held a few singles and the effort it takes to risk being public with your voice. He put $1 in, the one he had once asked for. This one had traveled a longer road than most. He didn't make a speech. He didn't tell the man why the act mattered to him. He kept walking, lighter by an ounce and heavier by a story. If there's a lesson that doesn't get old no matter how many cities forget to teach it, it is this. Asking is not surrender. It is participation. There is a difference between losing dignity and spending pride wisely. He had not begged. He had petitioned another human being. The outcome had not erased him. It had underlined him. The next winter came. This time he had a coat that was his own. He still kept the borrowed one dry cleaned and hung carefully, not as a relic, as a reminder that help is a chain you join, not a spotlight you stand in. When a new hire asked him offhand what the most important skill in security is, he didn't say strength or vigilance. He said, attention, the kind you lend, not hoard, the kind that makes people feel less alone when the world is trying to make everyone mind their own business and nothing else. Sometimes, when the lobby quieted late, just a hum of lights, the soft squeak of a mop far down a hallway, he would pause by the glass and catch his reflection. He did not look away anymore. He studied his face like it belonged to a man whose next day had a shape he'd helped make. He breathed slow and felt the steady drum of a heart that had learned its limits and found a rhythm anyway. He allowed himself the small, private smile of someone who has re-entered his life by the front door. And if anyone ever asked him how it started, he told the truth with the smallest request I could think to make, with a coat that wasn't mine and a car that was warm, with a young man who decided 10 minutes is plenty of time to change everything if you're brave enough to spend them well, with a decision to let help be a form of dignity instead of a theft of it. If this story finds someone on a cold morning, on a bench, on a curb, or just inside themselves. Let it stand as permission to ask for $1 when that's the sentence you can manage. To listen for the yes, that sounds like a door opening. To be the person who says, it's okay if you happen to be the one wearing the coat that day. To use the power you have, whether the phone number someone else doesn't, or the patience to stand still with a stranger until their courage arrives. Because a coin is small, but a pivot is not. A nod is small, but a life that uncurls because of it isn't. A number on a card is small, but systems move when someone decides they should. A boy's decision on a sidewalk is small in the history of a city that never stops telling stories about itself. But inside a single life, it's the kind of chapter that future chapters refer back to. How did you get here? Someone will ask one day, and the answer will begin simply, honestly, beautifully. I asked for $1. Someone saw me, and then I walked forward. If you like this story, please hit the subscribe button for future updates.